On today's show, the Hawks are unable to get any kind of defensive resistance going against the Charlotte Hornets on a Monday evening, and as a result, they give up 144 points to the Hornets. Yes, 144, a season high. It was a calamity. The Hawks did not play well at all on this Monday. They were still able to get back into the game down the stretch and had some chances to escape with a victory, but in the end, it wasn't quite enough. We'll have the full breakdown of this game and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1412 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started with FanDuel. I also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as always, to make us your first listen each and every day at the Locked On Hawks podcast. Follow us across podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We should be there, and we do appreciate you listening to today's show. It was going to focus on Saddiq Bey on some level, and also we'll get back to that later on. But for the most part, the headliner of this game has to be the Hawks' calamitous defensive performance against the Charlotte Hornets. Final score, 144-138 up in Charlotte. And yes, the Bey trade went through. He ended up playing. We'll talk about that more. The Hawks fall back to 500 with this loss at 29-29, and they lose the season series in pretty stunning fashion to the Hornets, 3-1. Not exactly what you would normally see. The Hawks did have a nice, valiant comeback effort at the end. They were down by 17 points with about 10 minutes to go. Got it all the way down to 1 in the final 90 seconds, but it wasn't quite enough to get it over the line. And there you go. I will start here and just say, context-wise, this is not a good loss for the Hawks under any circumstances. Of course, the defense is the headliner, but it's not quite as bad as it would have been had they lost to, let's say, San Antonio on Saturday, or if they had lost to the Zombie Suns last week at home, because those are home games against bad teams, and this is a road game. Anything can happen on the road in the NBA, but the Hornets have been a mess for a while. In fact, they had lost 7 straight games coming into the night. They were tied for the worst record in the Eastern Conference coming into the night, and they've now won 3 times against the Hawks this year and only 13 times against any other team in the league. Also, the Hornets did not have some rotation guys in this game. Cody Martin, Kelly Oubre, not their best players, but certainly guys who play for them every night on the wing. And yes, Atlanta was down a key piece in John Collins, in particular on the defensive end of the floor, which we'll come back to later on. And the game was on the road, but our friends at FanDuel made the Hawks a 5.5 point favorite in this game. As we'll get to right now, the defense just collapsed, and the Hawks never led in this game. That's actually kind of a weird thing to happen in an NBA game, especially when it's kind of competitive down the stretch. But the Hawks never led, and it was defensively. They just kind of fell apart in this one. So they allow 144 points on 107 possessions defensively. That's about a 135 defensive rating. If you're not big into the defensive rating and more advanced metrics, the worst team in the league is the Spurs this year, and they have about a 120 defensive rating for the year. The Hawks had a 135 tonight against a Hornets team that, by the way, ranks coming into the night dead last in the NBA in offensive efficiency. Now, the Hornets are better than that with LaMelo Ball. He missed a lot of time early in the season. That's part of why they're at the bottom. But they're not a good offense no matter what. Even with LaMelo, they're still below average, and the Hawks gave up 135 defensive rating to the Hornets. Also, their season high allowed in points is 144, which was happening tonight. The previous mark was held by the Warriors game that went to double overtime. So this is the easily worst defensive performance by the number of points in a regulation game this season. And look, the shooting was a big problem, as we'll focus on here in a second, but it was not the only issue in this game. And that's partially not in Atlanta. Of course, there's some shooting variance. Anytime you allow 144, it's kind of hard to do that without the other team cooperating and playing well. But the Hornets did shoot above their heads in this game unequivocally. That's part of the story here, so we'll touch on that now. They shot 55% or better in every single quarter in this game. That's actually hard to do. There's usually some ebb and flow over the course of a 4-quarter NBA game, 48 minutes, and the Hornets just made shots all night long. They shot 20 of 37 from 3. That tied their season high for 3-pointers made in a game. They shot 63% from the field in this game. That's just a ridiculous number. And look, a decent number of those jump shots that they made, both inside the arc and outside the arc, were contested. The Hawks didn't just completely fall down on defense the entire game, but you cannot blame it just on shot making if you watch the tape back. First, the Hawks were just flat out terrible containing the ball all night long. I know Nate McMillan is a punching bag at times, but he said after the game that the Hawks just couldn't contain the ball, and he's 100% right. If you watch the tape, especially early on, the Hawks just did not have resistance on the perimeter this entire game, and that was going to get them in a bad spot because Charlotte had a lot of freedom early on. They got a rhythm with their shooters, and then the Hawks basically got blitzed by that, and they were genuinely bad defensively, just with coverages, rotations, all kinds of breakdowns. But it started at the top of the key on the perimeter. They weren't rotating properly. They weren't digging down. They weren't doing everything that you want to do defensively. The one area they were good defensively in this game was rebounding, but other than that, it was really bad. And look, did they deserve a 135 defensive rating against Charlotte? Probably not. But the Hornets did, they did outplay the Hawks on that end of the floor, even when you sort of level off the shooting variance. And the Hawks were awesome on offense for the most part in this game. But defensively, if you look at this game and coming away with it, I saw some takeaways after this game about the Hawks offense. Look, this is one of those nights where you can kind of just cross off the offense as a negative talking point. The defense was the reason why the Hawks lost this game. Full stop. Yes, there's some hat tipping going on to Charlotte, but the Hawks were not good enough defensively. Full stop. And yeah, without Collins, they're not the same team defensively. I know that nationally he's not quite regarded as a high-end defender. Collins is a big part of their defense, and there's a big drop-off without him, but he shouldn't be accounting for this kind of drop-off defensively. So it was everybody involved. Even the big guys weren't totally dominant defensively. I think it was more on the perimeter for sure. Player for players we'll get into later on. Not a lot of defensive standouts in this game, but just a bad night overall on defense, and it really, really cost them against a opponent that they definitely should have beaten, that they're better than. The Hawks are better than the Hornets, and you cannot lose to a team that you're better than 3 out of 4 times and feel good about that. So that was sort of the headliner of the evening. From there, again, the offense was good in this game, and the possession battle was pretty crazy. In fact, the wild thing about this game overall is how big Atlanta's edge was in the possession battle, and they still couldn't win because of how bad the defense was. The Hawks absolutely crushed the glass in this game on offense and defense, and they also won the turnover margin by 5. If all you showed me about this game was the rebound margin and the turnover margin, I would have said the Hawks won this game 90% of the time or higher. That's how much of a possession battle edge they had. In fact, they took 24 more shots from the field than the Hornets did. You don't lose games when you shoot that many more times from the field than your opponent, but the Hawks did because they could not get stops. By the way, they scored 20 points more than the Hornets did in the paint, 74 points in the paint for the Hawks. I am the first to point out when the Hawks don't shoot enough threes, and the Hawks are not a high enough volume team from 3 in this season that I believe that they should be. But this is not a game to worry about that. They took 28. That's not a crazy high number by any means, but they did everything they wanted to do on offense in this game. They scored effectively. They had almost 1.3 plus possession in the game. And you cannot pick on the offense on this night. They were above average from shooting. They were great on the offensive glass, obviously. They were solid in the ball security. It just didn't matter because of how bad they were defensively. So we'll get into how sort of all the game tracked, the game flow, and how, again, the Hawks never led in this game. And then they player evaluations later on. But the Hawks are now 500 again this season. And if you want to circle anything about this game, it was that defense, broadly speaking, and in particular on the perimeter, just absolutely collapsed at an inopportune time. And that is what cost the Hawks this victory and sent them back to 500 for the season. All right, we'll get into more of this game, of course. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, and the midway point of the season is now behind us in the NBA. The All-Star break is rapidly approaching. Of course, it is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That means bonus bets coming back to you if your first bet doesn't win with FanDuel. Download the app right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's safe, secure, and super easy to use about anything that you're looking for. That includes point spreads and totals and money lines, player props, etc. If you listen to this on Tuesday, there's a full slate of NBA and college action out there for you, and the Hawks are back on the floor on Wednesday for a high-profile game against the Knicks. I'll be interested to see what the spread is in that one, but we'll stay tuned for all of that point spread information coming up later on this week. And from there, find many more exclusive bets at FanDuel, like the 2x3, which is where there'll be 2 3-pointers in the first 3 minutes of the game, and much more. Plus, FanDuel allows you to combine bets together for a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get in on the no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 at bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, we'll dive into the game flow in this one. Again, I think I said it before once, but John Collins did not play. He was questionable with hip flexor soreness. Also, McDonough was questionable with hip soreness as well. Bogey ended up playing. Collins did not. No further update that I have seen about Collins and his injury, so we'll see if he returns on Wednesday. But questionable. At least he wasn't ruled out early in the day, and they definitely missed him in this one for sure. But that was kind of the only pregame hiccup point other than Bay being active and starting. That was a bit of an interesting situation with Saddiq Bey. In fact, I was pretty stunned that he started in this game, and even more so after the game, because Bey told the media, I'm quoting Lauren Williams of the AJC here, Bey said after the game that because of the trade and all that stuff, he had not been on the floor in the gym in 3 days. And, just for a reference point, Bruno Fernando was acquired at the same time as Bey. He was actually able to go through shoot around the other day and be around the team in official capacity. He was in street clothes in this game, and he was active, but just wasn't even dressed for the game. Whereas Bey ended up starting, which was certainly curious. I'm not saying it's not his fault, by the way. I want to be very, very clear about that. That's not Bey's decision. But Nate said after the game that he basically was choosing that to try to keep his units together. I speculated that before the game when they announced that Bey was going to start, that I was like, well, Nate really, really likes to keep guys playing together in units. And Nate did say that after the game. I didn't love that. I would not have started Bey and played him that much in this game because he seemed like he didn't have any idea of where to be, which again is not his fault at all. He wasn't ready to play probably. But anyway, I get kind of all of that on each side. But I was expecting them to start either Griffin or Bogey in this game. I know the fans wanted Jalen Johnson. I get that, but Nate has shown a proclivity for not starting Jalen next to Capella in particular. But anyway, we'll come back to that later on. I just want to say that was pretty interesting at the top of this game. The Hawks were down by 10 at the first time out of the gate. So as I said before, they never led because they were in a hole immediately out of the gate. They allowed 20 points on the first 12 possessions defensively. Also, the Hawks missed their first, 5 shots of the game. They were 0-6 from the floor with Hunter and Bey at the outset. Capella was the only kind of bright spot early on. He had 8 points out of the first 10. Plus 4 rebounds for Atlanta in about 5 minutes. Rotationally, no huge surprises other than Bey, of course, starting. But he actually came out first. Trey didn't take his mid-quarter break in the first quarter. He did take it in the second half. So no huge rotation changes. It will be more interesting to me and others to see what the Hawks do when Collins is available, because that's the big question about the Saddiq Bey acquisition. Is not a bad thing, by the way. You can't have too much depth. I know it's a talking point. I wouldn't worry about that at all. But are they going to play 10 guys when Saddiq Bey is around and also John Collins is around? Or is like Jalen Johnson going to stop playing or whatever? I would try to play 10 and try to keep Jalen engaged, but that's a big question moving forward that was not answered tonight because of Collins' absence. The Hawks were down by as many as 14 points in the first quarter. They did a terrible job containing ball handlers again from the perimeter, and not the same level of rim protection either without Collins on the floor. Playing, two smaller forwards, two not like traditional power forwards together in Bey and Hunter. It was magnified because Bey didn't really know where to be yet, but it was pretty obvious how bad the defense sort of suffered without that secondary organizer and rim protector in Collins. The Hawks tried some zone to some ill effect, I thought, in the first quarter, but I didn't blame them for trying it. It was kind of a mess down the stretch of the first quarter as well. Trey got a technical foul. That was his 12th of the season. And by the way, there's a decent chance Trey gets suspended for a game at some point because he has 12 technical fouls and 16 is a suspension. So he is more than on pace for that if you go game for game. He doesn't have to get that many for sure, but he definitely could be in that peril of missing a game later on the season due to technical foul rack-ups, because that's a league rule that has been long on the books. And you might remember that most prominently because of Draymond Green getting technical foul points and missing a finals game that they ended up losing back in 2016. Jalen Johnson missed a dunk in that stretch as well. A couple wide open threes that were missed by good shooters. Just a kind of a messy end of the quarter. And they were down by 9. And honestly, I felt like the Hawks were pretty fortunate to be down by 9 at the end of the first quarter. They were 9 of 29 from the field and 0 of 8 from 3 at the end of the first quarter. So if you're trying to circle the offense, it was really the first quarter that was bad. The rest of the game, they were basically perfect on offense. Just the first quarter was kind of a slow start. And defensively, as we have talked about a lot, it was quite bad. Once the best shooter came in with DeJounte Murray in the second quarter, they actually were better on offense. They scored 16 points on the first 8 possessions of the second quarter. But defensively, it continued to be a disaster. And that led to a 12-2 run by the Hornets in the middle of the quarter. They had 2 points in like 3 minutes of that stretch as well. Bogey played 14 consecutive minutes in the first half. I really, really don't like that. I kind of get why it happened on some level because of the Bey changes there. Also, Trey played the whole first quarter, etc. But I don't love that attempt. I'm not sure if it's a training staff thing or whatever, that they think Bogey's better off playing one long stint. But I think because of the fact that Bey wasn't ready to play a full workload, I think I would have gone back to Griffin or Johnson because Bogey, wasn't playing well too. It'd be different if he had the hot hand. It would have been more understandable, but Bogey was not good in this game. So I wanted to at least circle that and just point out that I didn't love that deployment by any means. There was a nice corner 3 by Bey at the end of the first half. Actually hit 2 in a pretty short amount of time, 1 from Trey and 1 from DeJounte. And he's going to get a lot of that shot, as a lot of the Hawks do. But Bey is a better shooter pretty clearly than like Jalen Johnson is, for instance. He's not quite at the level of a sniper of Bogey or Griffin, but Bey is a step up from Jalen in particular as a shooter, and even from Collins as a shooter at this point in terms of like being guarded and providing gravity. And he'll have all you can eat on those corner threes. That's sort of a good thing to see there. Honestly, that's probably going to be, in my mind, his number one strength, number one appeal on offense right now is going to be his 3-point shooting on the perimeter. So that there's something there. The Hawks did chip away and get back within 6 at the end of the first half because they had an offensive rating over 150 in the second quarter. That is ludicrous, but unfortunately, defense never fully cooperated. After halftime, they were down by 11 again, pretty much in a hurry. They traded like 6-0 runs in the middle of the quarter. It was a long review with like 4 minutes to go in the third when Kong got fouled hard. I thought I might get upgraded to a flagrant foul, but it wasn't at that point in time. Hawks finally got some stops in the middle of the third quarter, got back within 3, and actually had a chance, I think, 2 different times with a shot in the air to get within 1 or even tie the game. And those shots went begging, but offensively they sputtered late in the third. And Trey had a really, really bad fast break that was kind of out of character for him. That was a bad possession. Bogey had a pretty ugly mid-ranger in that stretch as well. And then the Hornets closed the third quarter on a 10-0 run, but the Hawks down by 13 points. The Hawks didn't score for the final 240, had 7 trips in a row where they didn't score, and Charlotte was, again, just cooking on offense that entire stretch. It actually became an 18-4 overall run by the Hornets. I said this earlier in the podcast, but the Hawks were down by 17 points with 10 minutes to go. And from that point forward, they actually played quite well in the fourth quarter. It was just the hole was too big, and that's why the entire game matters. They did what they had to do quickly to kind of cut the lead in half. Bogey had a pull-up 3. It was down to 9 with like 7 minutes to go, and that was like step 1 check, basically, in that stretch for the Hawks. There was a big play with like 4:30 to go. Hunter hit a jump shot and was fouled by Gordon Hayward. He might have tweaked something actually on the landing, but ended up staying in the game. It looked like he might have rolled his ankle. It was reviewed for a flagrant foul and upgraded to a flagrant foul for a 3-point play for Hunter. And the Hawks got the ball on that play on that play as well, down 7. Unfortunately, they didn't score. That was a sort of an open door that was kind of closed on them, and the Hornets kept on scoring. 3 buckets in a row for Charlotte to make life difficult. But there was one more run coming for Atlanta, an 8-2 push, threes by Bogey and Trey, and a dunk from Clint Capella. And the Hornets had to call a timeout with 2 minutes to go, with 4 on the shot clock. So the Hawks were, again, back within 3 or 4 points at that stage. And again, right in the middle of the game, 4 on the shot clock defensively. Trey did a really good job defensively on that play, actually, to force that tie up, and that led to a timeout. But and at that point, the Hawks had cut the deficit from 17 down to 2 in about 8 minutes. But from there, it was not what you want. So Hayward hit a 3 out of an ATO that was a good play by the Hornets, but also a breakdown by the Hawks to go back up by 5. Trey, though, did create 4 straight points, actually a floater of his own, and then a lob to Capella, and the Hawks got within 1, their closest margin in the entire game, with about 80 seconds to go. But then Rozier beat Trey for a backdoor for an easy layup to go back down by 3 points. And then the biggest, sort of highlight swing, probably national highlight play in this game was Mark Williams, the rookie center from the Hornets, blocking a Trae Young step-back 3 on the next possession, and then got an outlet pass and finished the layup in transition. It was honestly a great play by Williams, so I want to give him the hat tip there. It was a very athletic play for a 7-footer to be able to do that. Also, though, a bad shot by Trey. I get why he was a little bit cooking at that point in time. He was playing well in the fourth quarter. That was a bad forced shot against a guy. I think he just kind of misjudged who the opponent was. Mark Williams has a 7'7" wingspan, and most guys don't block that shot. But Mark Williams is a really, really good shot blocker who is absolutely enormous. So Trey just kind of misjudged that. Ends up being a block, a run out, a layup, and the Hawks are down by 5 points. It wasn't over, but that was a big swing, obviously. And then after Trey did score on the next possession out of a timeout, a nice pick and pop by the Hornets ends up with a PJ Washington 3-pointer for the actual dagger with about 25 seconds to go. But the Hawks down by 6, and that was the end of that. So, again, the Hawks did chip away, and there should be some positivity about the way the Hawks closed this game. I don't want to overstate it either. It wasn't like you're going to throw a parade by any means. But the Hawks didn't roll over. They could have, and they were right there. Again, down by 1 with 80 seconds to go, and then down by 2 or 3 a couple different times in the final couple minutes. And, if Trey just sneaks that 3 over Mark Williams' hands, maybe it's a tie game. I'm not sure if that would have gone in. Anyway, we'll never know. But that was a huge swing play. And then kind of fittingly, another 3 from a decent shooter in PJ Washington, but not a great shooter by the Hornets to kind of put the game out of reach. And we'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll get to the player evaluations in a second, and I promise you there's plenty to say about all of those guys in this particular contest. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show today. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner or hiring manager, success in 2023 is all dependent on the team members that you surround yourself with, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs is a fantastic option for you. LinkedIn Jobs helps you help hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. I've used them in the past, LinkedIn Jobs, and it really has been an awesome experience. It's painless. It makes the entire thing easy and quick, and really just a satisfying experience from top to bottom. They help you to attract qualified candidates to open jobs with targeting tools, and they make it easy to screen applicants based on your job qualifications all in one platform. They go beyond the resume data by using insights from your job post, your company, and their millions of member profiles, but the posts from a lot of different people, obviously, and doing it quickly and doing it for free. LinkedIn Jobs is rated #1 in delivering quality hires with leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs also helps you find the most qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and they help you to do it faster. Post your job for free. Yes, for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. One more time. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply. All right. I would normally start with the bench guys, but I'm going to start with Saddiq Bey because it was his first game in the Hawks uniform. The trade finally, after the long national nightmare, gets approved on Sunday evening, and Bey is able to suit up and play in this one. He ends up with 12 points on 21 minutes. He hit 3 threes. That's good to see. 3 out of 5. Had 5 rebounds. Did have a block shot. 2 turnovers. Again, the start is kind of surprising to me. I should have said this earlier, but it was kind of reminiscent of a time where, actually multiple times, where Nate has started Aaron Holiday to the frustration of Hawks fans when Aaron had been like out of the rotation, but you get one injury and it's suddenly Aaron Holiday starting because Nate just loves to go with those units. I would have played Bey less in this game. I would have maybe tried him at some point, but I would have certainly rather started any of the bench guys in his place in this one. It wasn't like he played badly, but defensively, he was definitely a liability in this game. It was even more stark because of the fact that Collins has been good this year and would have been more of an organizer. But Bey, again, not his fault at all. I want to stress that. Just wasn't prepared to play. I don't think that he was as dialed on the system. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, I guess last week on the trade deadline reaction podcast. Bey has not been a good defender in his career. So that's at least worth noting. Like, I'm not sure Hawks fans or maybe fans in general kind of understand that Bey is, at least to this point, a below average, at least to be kind, defender. But I think he might get better in the Hawks uniform. But tonight is one where I kind of want to cross it off as far as like future facing. But he was certainly not good defensively. But there were nice flashes on offense. The 3 threes that kind of speaks for itself. He's a real weapon there. He's only like a career 36-ish% 3-point shooter, which is fine. But I think that he is a solid above average shooter from at least at the 4. Definitely at the 4, he's above average from 3-point range. And then the rest of his game on offense, I think he's probably better suited for a pretty low usage role. He was only 1 of 4 on 2s in this game. That's been actually a theme of his career. He's like 45% career on 2s. So I think he's definitely best suited for a 3-and-D kind of pure role right now. We'll see. But I always want to talk about him at the top of the podcast. And tough spot for him. Obviously, I've heard a lot of stuff that's really good about Saddiq Bey as a guy the last couple of days, just asking around the league about him, dating back to Villanova, et cetera. So a lot of good reviews about Saddiq Bey, but obviously a tough spot for him. Honestly, him starting and closing this game is pretty crazy with no practice and none of that stuff. So an interesting spot there, but I thought he did at least a reasonable job, even if he was certainly behind the curve in what he knew and what he was able to execute in this game. Back to the bench, where it was kind of an adventure in this one. In fact, the bench was not good. I thought Okongwu was probably the bright spot, so we'll start there. He had 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. Very active for Okongwu. Did 4 fouls in 19 minutes in typical Okongwu fashion, but certainly was habit creating and was making a lot of things just happen, generally speaking, in this one. I thought he probably could have played a little bit more down the stretch. I thought Capella was pretty good, though, so it's kind of I could see both sides, but I think Okongwu and Capella were 2 of their best 4 or 5 players in this game. Like, they both played well, and they were not the problem at all. It was more the perimeter guys, but I thought Okongwu was their bright spot off the bench. AJ Griffin had kind of a rough one, 6 points on 7 shots, including 2 of 2 from the free throw line. So 2 of 7 from the floor, did have 4 rebounds and an assist. AJ has been a little bit cold in recent days. Obviously, he was probably due for that. But I believe 5 of the last 6 games, he has shot 43% or worse from the field. He is now shooting, I think it's like 27% from 3 in February. So, like, I don't worry about that at all. But he's just, I think, maybe hit the rookie wall. Probably could be using the All-Star break right about now. And by the way, he doesn't really have the full All-Star break either. He has to go to Salt Lake City and play. So keep an eye on that. Jalen Johnson was fine. 9 points on 7 shots. Only one rebound in this game. Defensively, a couple of missed rotations, I thought, from both Griffin and Johnson. Typical young guy stuff, but certainly they were not part of the solution defensively at all in this one. And then Bogey, 11 points, 2 steals, 2 assists, and 4 rebounds. So like some counting stats there. Made 3 of 5 from 3, but was 2 of 6 from 2. And defensively, it was really rough. I think that it seems to me, I think he might be underrated to Hawks fans right now. I think that Bogey is not playing particularly well, but there's this notion that he's like totally useless. I don't believe that at all. But if you watch the defense in this game, there were lots of problems, but he was a prominent one of those. Not be able to slide, move his feet, keeping guys in front of him. And then offensively, he forced it a little bit. He was better in the second half for sure on offense, and actually had the best plus minus of any of the bench guys. But defensively, it was notably bad, I thought, from Bogey in this game. To the starters, other than Bey, who we talked about already, Hunter had a decent game on offense. 21 points, 7 rebounds, pretty solid there. 8 of 17 from the floor, 1 of 5 from 3. So that means he was 7 of 12 on 2s. I thought he was aggressive and good on offense. It was one of his worst defensive games in a while, which is not surprising given the context of the team. But I thought Gordon Hayward got him a few times in this game, and Hunter wasn't like the problem, but certainly wasn't as good as he has been defensively for most of the season in this game. But he was the best plus minus on the team at +9. I'm not sure he like earned that, quote unquote, but I thought he was fine in general because the offense was pretty good, even if the defense was not. DeJounte Murray, 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists for DeJounte. I thought he was pretty actively bad defensively, especially on the LaMelo ball. LaMelo got wherever he wanted to go for the most part in this game, had 30 and 15 assists. That's not all on Murray by any means, but as I said before, I think basically no one was good on the perimeter defensively in this game. I'll be very clear about that. No one was good. No one. And I think Murray has this stopper reputation that he's not really earned defensively. He is good as a havoc creator off the ball, as a passing lanes guy, but on the ball, it continues to be more stark game by game that Murray's just not particularly good at that. And I think he has a reputation that outpaces that, but he was pretty bad on the ball in this one. Trae Young had a big game, 25 points, 14 assists. Didn't have his great shooting night, though. He was only 5 of 11 on 2s and 2 of 7 on 3s. So below average efficiency there. Got to the line 9 times, made all 9. That's always a nice thing for Trae to do. Defensively, pretty bad. I thought he had a couple nice plays in the fourth quarter when he was more locked in, but he was part of the problem like everybody else was on the perimeter in this game, and we'll leave it there for now. And then Capella, 22 points, 7 rebounds, did have a steal in this game as well, 11 of 17 from the floor. It was kind of ironic. Like, the Hawks didn't have anybody that was a great rebounder in this game because the Hornets just made every shot. It was kind of funny, but the Hawks did a good job team rebounding on this one. That was kind of the one bright spot defensively. I thought Clint was pretty effective in this game. Again, I thought he and Okongwu might have been 2 of their best 3 players alongside Trae in this one, maybe 4 if you want to throw in Hunter. So I don't know, a lot to get to there, but it was a generally maddening performance from the Hawks defensively. And we'll end with this. I had a tweet go viral about 10 days ago about how kind of just the Hawks had been this 500 team across the board. And ironically, the Hawks are back to being that again after tonight's game. They are 29-29 the season. They are dead in the middle of the East. There are 7 teams worse than them. There are 7 teams better than them, and they're right in the middle of 15 teams in the East. They are 5-5 against the division this year in the Southeast. And as of this moment, they have scored the exact same amount of points that they have allowed for the season. They have a dead even ±0 net rating for the season. That means the Hawks are as 500 as possible at this moment. And do I believe they're better than that? I do. But the results say after, again, like 2/3 of the season are now in the books. The Hawks have been this team, and actually more than 2/3 of the season are not on the books. And the Hawks have been this team all year long. So there's still time, but it's a frustrating result to be sure. And honestly, they don't have a lot of time here because the last game before the All-Star break is a pretty big one on Wednesday. It's a home showdown against the New York Knicks. The Knicks are playing pretty well this year. Jalen Brunson had a huge game tonight for the Knicks. I think he had 40 points for New York, and they're now 32-27 on the year. So the Hawks are 2.5 games behind the Knicks, but this is one that you have to circle for a number of reasons. Number one, New York is the team that's directly ahead of the Hawks in the standings. Number two, the Hawks could win the season series against New York with a win. It's currently 2-1 in favor of Atlanta. If they win this one, that occurs a tiebreaker against the Knicks. So it's kind of a double game in some ways. Plus, it's at home, and it's the last game for 9 days. Basically, there's always better vibes if you win on the way out to the All-Star break than if you were to lose, especially after a loss tonight. So a pretty big one on the agenda for Wednesday. I'm not one to put undue emphasis on any game in February of the NBA season, but certainly given the standings and given where the Hawks are, getting that one at home would be very, very nice, and we'll see how the projection goes in that game. And the Hawks have been pretty good at home at times, but the Knicks have been pretty feisty this year and have been the better team so far this season, which is kind of crazy. But I would have lost a bet on that for sure through 59 games or something like that. But Atlanta has a good chance to get a sort of a palate cleansing win on Wednesday if they can play better on defense. Because again, full circle here, offense pretty darn good in this game for the most part. Defense pretty darn bad in this one, and that was the recipe for what was a pretty bad loss. Was it the worst loss of the season? No, but was it on the top 10 list of worst losses of the season? Almost certainly, when you factor in everything going on with the Hornets and the fact that the Hawks lost to a team again that now has 3 wins over the Hawks this season and 13 against the rest of the league. They are 16-43, and the Hawks have lost to them 3 times. Not great as we end the podcast on this Monday. All right, we'll sign off now. Please subscribe to this show. If you are a new listener, welcome aboard. I appreciate everyone jumping on the podcast. I know football's over now, so maybe people have a little bit more time for local professional basketball. If you're a new listener, I really do appreciate that. And please subscribe to the show anywhere you like to listen to the podcast: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, Google Play. We should be there, all those places. And please auto-download, as well as ratings and reviews are always appreciated. We're also on video over on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to the podcast over there. I write about the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. You can also follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. I appreciate all the support. Hopefully we'll have more positive stuff to talk about in the relatively near future. We'll have much more content coming up. We're not going to take the entire break either. We'll have multiple podcasts between the Hawks games that I guess are 8 or 9 days apart. A lot of shows might take a hiatus there. I'll probably take a couple of days off for sure, but I will have content through the All-Star break as well. So we never really fade away on the Locked On Hawks podcast. And I appreciate all the support. Please subscribe, tell a friend, and we'll see you next time.